Everyone. Since it is 1 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon and welcome to this week's installment of the Huron Pines Connecting to Nature series. We're really excited to spend the next 30 minutes learning with you. Here at Huron Pines, we work to conserve and enhance Northern Michigan's natural resources, focused in 3 primary program areas: healthy water, protected places, and vibrant communities. Our staff implement projects from river restoration to green infrastructure to protecting special places forever and controlling invasive species populations. If you're not familiar with our work, we encourage you to get to know us. I'm Jen Klemm, Huron Pines AmeriCorps, serving at Huron Pines as part of my VISTA service through Michigan Tech, where I'm pursuing my master's in applied ecology. Josh Leisen of Huron Pines will be leading a great conversation today, and before we wade into that, I have just a couple of housekeeping items. Please make use of the chat box to respond to questions, which you'll see bolded on the slides, or to ask questions of your own today. We'll also have time set aside at the end for a full Q&A, and we will be using the polling function today, so you'll see a pop-up box to respond. If you experience any technical difficulties, Chris Engel, our communications associate, is available in the chat, by email, or phone. We will also be recording this installment, so if you lose connection, you can watch later. And finally, I want to acknowledge the incredible funders who support the Huron Pines Education Program: the Great Lakes Fishery Trust, Consumers Energy Foundation, the U.S. Forest Service, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities through the Healthy Watersheds Consortium program, and individual donors and supporters like you. And with that, I'm going to let Josh introduce himself, and then we'll wade into this week's topic.
Thanks, Jen. I'm Josh Leisen, Senior Project Manager with Huron Pines, and my role here is doing a lot of our river restoration work. So that includes a lot of road stream crossing improvements, small dam removals, and quite a few other things as well. So I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining, and we're going to talk about rivers today. So I'll start off with a very basic question. What is a river? So the dictionary definition of a river is that it's a natural stream of water of usually considerable volume. So that it's a natural water course, and rivers tend to be larger than smaller water bodies such as creeks or brooks, although what we'll cover today will pretty much apply to any natural water course. So a quick question to get started off here. I want to ask, when did you last spend time on or near a river? And we have a poll for that.
So you'll see that poll pop up.
And personally, I've been to a river within the last week, and hopefully I'll be getting out to one later this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think hopefully most people are going to be getting out, at least on the water in some way, with this weekend. But we are seeing about half of attendants have been out on a river within the past week. One person has been out today. Most people kind of within the past month, within the past 12 months, or more than a year ago. So.
Okay, great, thanks.
So awesome. Yeah, so when we're thinking about rivers, what are the factors that are shaping them anyway?
So the factors at kind of the larger landscape level, the factors that influence the shape and size of a river include precipitation. So rivers get their water from rainfall and snowmelt. And so the amount of precipitation, as well as the drainage area of where that precipitation is coming and how it's coming through the river channel, plays a role in how big a river is going to be. The lay of the land is also very important. So topography is your elevation, your hills, and your valleys. So that influences how a river moves through the landscape and how steep a river channel is. So it's slope or gradient, which in turn impacts things like the velocity of the water in a stream. Geology is also really important. So the land underneath the stream, that can be bedrock, or it might be the sand or silt or other soil material that the river flows through. And that affects how groundwater or overland flow brings water into a river. And it also can create barriers to rivers. Rivers may have to flow, be constricted through canyons, for example, but rivers are also powerful, like the Grand Canyon picture here. They can carve their own way through a landscape as well. Vegetation is also really important to rivers. So at the immediate area of a stream, the forest around a stream channel is called the riparian area. And trees are really important for providing shade, which can regulate water temperature in a river. And it also provides habitat, like when trees fall in the river and create woody debris that can be cover for fish to hide behind. Trees also soak up a lot of water through their root systems. So having a really forested watershed can impact the amount of water that reaches the stream, as well as how the rate at which water reaches the stream too. And then humans have an important role in shaping streams, and I'll devote a slide later on to talk about some of the human alterations to rivers. I wanted to ask you guys, what is your favorite river? Kind of a fun question.
Yeah, I like it. And a lot of those factors I think we don't normally think about, but I know my favorite is the Amazon, right? And so a lot of vegetation happening there, a lot of cover.
Yeah, I've been to the Amazon and it's amazing. I have to say my favorite is the Mississippi River. I'm partial to it. I grew up in Red Wing, Minnesota, which is a town on the Mississippi River. So that's where I learned to enjoy fishing and spent the first half of my life. So
Awesome, yeah, and we're seeing the Au Sable here in Michigan, and the Upper Jordan River, and the Apalachicola, I think I said that. The Grand River, the Upper Black. So a lot of native local rivers.
yeah, those are all great streams for sure.
Yeah, and the Yellowstone too.
Mm-hmm.
So great. So we kind of know what these physical factors are, but what do rivers have? I think that we think that rivers are typically kind of static. So what are some normal features that you might see along a river?
Yeah, a river is definitely more than a blue line on a map, right? There's a lot going on in a river. So typically rivers follow a meandering form. They don't flow in a straight line across the landscape. They zigzag back and forth. And the main reason for that is when you have water flowing through a river, well, if there's any sort of bend at all, the momentum of that flowing water is going to hit the outside bank of the river and cause erosion. So it's going to dig into that outside bank and push it outwards. At the same time, on the inside of the river bend, the water is slower. You don't have that strong current. And when river water slows down, it can drop or deposit the fine material that it's carrying. So the sand or silt that's in the river starts to deposit, drop out, and it can build what's called a point bar, which is this feature here on the inside bend of a river. So over time, the river will actually push itself one way, and then as that current turns, it'll kind of slingshot it over to the next river bend. So it's a repeating pattern across the landscape. Rivers also, in the longitudinal upstream to downstream direction, rivers follow typically a riffle, run, pool, glide sequence. So a riffle is usually a straighter, shallower, wide section of the river characterized by fast water flowing over usually gravel or cobble. And it's easy to pick out visually when you're at a river because the water surface is really turbulent and choppy. When water flows out of a riffle, it usually kind of forms a chute called a run, where the water is still flowing fast, but it's through deeper water and it's less turbulent. And eventually that water slows down and creates a pool. And these are often at your outside bends of rivers, but they can also be associated with anything that disrupts the current, such as a boulder or a log jam in the river can create pools as well. So a pool is a deeper section of the river where the water is slower. And then as the river kind of rounds a bend, it will start to approach the next riffle. So this bottom of the stream will actually slope upwards towards the next riffle and become shallower. And a glide is characterized by that rising stream bed, and the surface of the water is usually glassy still, which kind of gives it gives it the name the glide. Rivers are really dynamic. They're fluctuating. So seasonally and after, storms and things, they can have dramatic swings in water level, right? So we experience droughts and floods, which can really change the characteristics of a river over time. At a finer scale, there's a lot of different microhabitats. So boulders and woody debris. Backwaters are areas of the river that might be a little bit off to the side, disconnected a little bit with slower stagnant water. Eddies are areas where there's kind of a whirlpool where you have a counter current and the water swirls around. Undercut banks often form on the outside of riverbanks where there's strong current that erodes underneath and creates kind of an overhanging bank. Aquatic plants can grow in the river, and aquatic vegetation is a type of habitat. And as the river floods, its floodplain or the surrounding riparian area can become flooded and become really part of the river as well.
Awesome. So how can understanding these, what do these actually look like?
Yeah, sure. So this is just an example I found online of a stream with a meander. And it really is a good example of that repeating riffle, run, pool, glide sequence. So on your right here, there's a riffle. You can see the surface of the water is a little choppy. There's probably gravel or cobble underneath that. The water shoots out through a run. So the water is deeper here. It's less turbulent, but it's still moving pretty quick until it kind of collides into this outside bend here. It becomes deeper and slower, and that's your pool. Often your outside bend has some erosion. And on the inside bend, you have that lower elevation area where there's deposition. So the river is dropping sand and silt and creating a bar here. Sorry about that. And then coming out of the pool, the slope of the river comes back up, creates a glide, that nice glassy surface. And glides, I should mention, are great areas for trout and salmon, for example, to lay their eggs, because the water or the stream bed is sloping up. The force of that water coming in is delivering nice oxygenated water to that gravel. So it's a great place to lay eggs, and it keeps it free from silt or being kind of smothered in sediment. So it's a great spot for spawning fish. Downstream from the glide, you see the next riffle, a bit of a run here, a pool coming through this undercut bank over here, and then your next glide, riffle, run, and you can't see it, but I would bet there's a pool on this outside bend as well.
Awesome. So how does knowing what all these features are and how to identify them, how does this help us?
Great question. So reading the river can help hone your observation skills about the natural world in general. It can help you develop a deeper understanding and appreciation for rivers. It can have safety implications as well if you're into river recreation, whether that's fishing, wading, boating, canoeing, or kayaking. Knowing how to read the water. If you've been kayaking and ever been carried by the current into a tree on the outside bend, maybe reading the river can help you avoid getting hung up in that, or avoiding dangerous situations. So that can be important. And if you're an angler, knowing how to read the river and think like a fish can help improve your fishing skills too. So another fun question for y'all. What is your favorite river-based activity?
This is hard. I know personally I love like kayaking and tubing, but I'm curious. Oh, we're seeing a lot of kayaking.
Mm-hmm.
Fishing, fly fishing, trout fishing.
I personally, anything that has to do with being by the river, I'm pretty into it. So just enjoy being by rivers.
Yeah. So for our fishing enthusiasts, do you have any tips for them about how reading the rivers can help them a little more specifically?
Yeah. So if you're a fish, so kind of to think like a fish, there's some certain things that you need to survive. At a very basic level, the water itself needs to be, have the right temperature range. It has to be relatively free of pollution so you can, live there if you're a fish. Have the right, flow characteristics, things like that. Dissolved oxygen. Beyond that, you're going to need food. So access to food is really important if you're a fish. And rivers kind of act like a conveyor belt, right? They're flowing water. So if you're a fish and you're in one point, you can kind of just wait there and the food will drift down to you. However, you don't want to spend all of your time in a feeding area because you might also become food for something else. Whether that's from above, ospreys or eagles might come down and snatch you, or a larger fish might be looking to grab you. So access to cover is really important for safety of the fish. They want to have somewhere where they can hide under undercut banks, behind boulders, under woody debris, in really fast water that kind of visually breaks up the surface, or deep water are all types of cover for fish. And that ties into efficiency too. So fish want to be next to that kind of conveyor belt, that strong current that's bringing food nearby. But to spend all of your time there, you're gonna spend a lot of energy waiting. So you want to have access to slow water where you can keep an eye on that faster water, dart out, grab food, and then retreat back into slower water and cover. And then for certain times of the year, spawning habitat is important. So fish will migrate within river systems to reach different types of habitat as necessary, and spawning is a good example of that. And just to give you an idea of where some of these fish lies might be in a river, this is just an overhead example I found online. The water here is flowing from the bottom of your screen up towards the top, and you'll notice the fish are pointing, their heads are pointing upstream, which is typical. So fish are commonly found in areas like deep water, like in 1 and 10 and 11. And 2 here, this is an eddy. So it's a swirling area of water, which is a great spot for feeding because food can often be trapped in there. Confluences, so where 2 rivers come together, can be a good spot to fish, or anywhere where there's a current seam between fast and slow moving water. Outside riverbanks with deep pools, especially if there's overhanging cover, can be exceptionally good locations for fish to hold, especially active fish. Within the middle of the channel, if there's boulders to hide behind, those can be good spots. And kind of the bottom of pools or deeper water can be good spots to find fish. However, if you see fish holding in slow, deep water, they tend to be less active. They may not be actively feeding, but it's a common spot to find fish.
Okay, awesome. So we can use all these to find fish as the rivers naturally are, but how are we as humans altering the rivers and altering their features and course?
So humans have had an impact and have used rivers extensively since prehistoric times. Rivers are really important for all the services and resources that they provide, for transportation, for food, and many other reasons. So one of the more obvious examples of a way to impact a river is to put a dam in it and create an impoundment. So these are highly visible structures on a river that have profound changes to a river. Water withdrawal is another use of rivers. So using water for agricultural irrigation or for commercial uses. We have roadways all across our landscape to get from place to place, or railways for other forms of transportation. And those inevitably will have to cross rivers. So we build bridges and install culverts at road stream crossings. We develop shorelines. So urban areas are usually extensively developed, but also in more rural areas, we have residential development as people like to live near a river. Dredging, particularly on large rivers where commercial transportation of goods is done. Dredging is digging out part of the river bottom to keep it deep enough to maintain navigational traffic. Channel modification is any adjust or alteration to the course of the channel. So redirecting a river to flow somewhere else for whatever reason. What we do in the landscape near the water or throughout a watershed that's contributing to a river can contribute pollution to the stream. Humans also move species around the world intentionally or unintentionally. So our invasive species introductions can have an impact on biological communities. We also harvest aquatic resources through fishing and other uses. And then again, it's not just what we do on or in the immediate area of a river that can impact a river. Really anything we do on the landscape could have an impact on the river because our watersheds, our land drains into rivers, right?
Awesome.
So here is a picture of my hometown of Red Wing, Minnesota. And I wanted to throw out a question and then I can jump in and add to it. But in the chat box, what ways are people using the river in the photo below? What river uses do you guys see in this photo?
So boating is coming up.
Definitely boating, a lot of boating.
There's a city right along it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Transporting of goods, probably.
Yep.
Heavy industry.
Mm-hmm.
Urbanization, the bridge. There's a forest nearby too.
Yeah. So yeah, those are great observations. Yeah, the transportation of goods comment, these are river barges. So, and these are parked along a seawall, so a heavily developed shoreline. And these are granary towers storing corn. This is a heavy agricultural area too. So corn and other goods are moved up and down river by barges here. There's a lot of recreational boating. So you see two marinas here in the foreground. These are private yachts for just enjoying the river, and fishing is also, recreational fishing is also really important there. This area down here is a large public park. So it's a green space, a place for people to gather and enjoy the scenery of the river and be down by the water. You can't see it, so it's cheating a little bit, but behind where this photo was taken, upstream from where this photo was taken, there's a lock and dam. And there's also a nuclear power plant that was put there because of access to the water, which is used to cool the reactors. So a lot of different uses for the Mississippi River here in Red Wing.
Okay, awesome. So now that we kind of know some features to look for and we know how rivers are shaped and how humans use them, how are some ways that we can apply this knowledge on a smaller scale and more individual level?
So rivers provide clean water, recreation, fish and wildlife habitat, scenery, spiritual connection, and many important ecosystem services. So it's really critical that for people and wildlife, that we keep our rivers healthy. They're very important to us, right? So we can't, as individuals, we may not have much of a say in some of the alterations to rivers, but there are certainly things that you and I can do at an individual personal level to help protect rivers. If you have land on a river, one of the obvious things is to protect the riparian area. So leaving an intact forest or prairie, kind of the native vegetation along the riverbanks, is really important for providing shade. It provides habitat in the form of woody debris, nutrients. It can help filter runoff, so stormwater runoff. Having natural plants there can help protect the water quality of the stream. And we did a Connecting to Nature series on stormwater specifically a couple of weeks ago that's relevant here. So we'll share that, and I'll link to that in the comments. If you haven't seen that yet, I recommend checking that one out too. There are things like river cleanups to collect trash, and then things we can do in our everyday lives, like reduce our water use, not wasting water, reducing the amount of pesticide or fertilizer we use on our lawns to reduce pollution. And even our consumer choices can have a difference. So eating less meat, eating local, things like that. Just choosing wisely what we buy to lessen our impact on our environment can help protect rivers as well. That's not an exhaustive list. So I wanted to ask you guys what your ideas are for ways that you as individuals can help protect rivers.
there's so many different ways, right, that we can do that, and by like not planting invasive species, or especially purple loosestrife for helping get rid of it, and a lot of different things that we can do kind of in that avenue too. As a plant person, right, my mind always goes straight to plants, but
Right.
Promote protective policies to help keep our rivers safe, right,
Yep,
is
that's
one
a
of the
good
ones
one.
coming up.
Absolutely.
Skip fertilizer and keep track of any waste that we have coming out when we're out on the water too.
Good.
Be careful on soft eroded banks too. So a lot of really good ideas in there too.
Excellent. So to wrap up, I have an activity for you all to do on your own next time you are at a river, or it can be a creek or a brook or any natural water course. It doesn't have to be a larger river, but this is a scavenger hunt list. So next time you're at a river, take this list with you and try to see if you can find all of these river features. And if you want to take a picture of each one and share that out on social media, you can tag us on that. We'd love to see those. Also, in addition to that, if you want to dig a little deeper, you can ask yourself questions about the river to try to get a better understanding of the river using the clues that you see around you. And as examples, and you can come up with your own questions too, but a few examples could be, how high does this river get when it floods? Has the stream channel moved over time? And how do you know that, or how so? How have human activities impacted that river segment that you're looking at? And if you were a fish, where would you choose to be? So just a few questions to get you thinking more about rivers next time you find yourself on a river.
Awesome. I can't wait to try finding all those features and all of that myself. So thank you, Josh, for that. If you guys are looking for other ways to get outside, be sure to check the Stay Connected to Nature page at huronpines.org. So that wraps up today's content. We appreciate everyone for joining us. I do have a few wrap-up items, and then we'll have time for questions. So as part of our efforts to understand how we can continue to improve education programming, we'd appreciate a couple of minutes of your time to fill out an evaluation survey at the conclusion of this, which Chris has put the link into the chat box. We also have an overview document that highlights the primary information covered today, as well as some additional resources, which will be sent to everyone who pre-registered with Chris. And if you didn't pre-register, please email Chris at huronpines.org, and he'll get you that information. And it's great. It has this activity and then some extra links and notes from the talk too. And then join us next Thursday at 1 p.m. Where we'll be covering how to protect wild places with Heather Hufstetler. So let's dive into some of those questions that we have coming in. So we have Rusty asked, are beavers rivers friends or foes?
Well, beavers are, a natural part of the ecosystem. They definitely have an impact on rivers. Those impacts can affect, human property if it causes flooding. They can affect fisheries. Some species of fish benefit while others may not, and it can create local changes to a river. They're usually temporary, on the scale of several years. So there's no doubt about it. Beavers do have an impact on rivers, and they're a part of the ecosystem.
Okay, that's fair. And then, what is the difference between cobble and gravel in a river?
It's the size. I don't have the technical cutoff, but cobble is larger sized rocks than gravel. Gravel is smaller.
Okay. Can you shed any light on the Arctic Grayling Initiative? Or do you know much?
I'm not too familiar with the current state of the project. Feel free to email me at josh@huronpines.org, and I can share some of the share contact information for some of the folks that are working on that for more information.
Great. And Josh and I can stay on the line for another 10 to 15 minutes to continue answering questions. But just to honor that 30-minute time slot, if you do need to jump off, we do appreciate you guys joining us today and hope to see you next week when we talk about protecting wild places. And then we do have some extra videos. And if you do want to get those take-home notes, which just kind of have a summary of everything we talked about and vocab, some extra links on the activity, feel free to go ahead and email Chris. But okay, so how long does it normally take for a river to shift its course on its own? So kind of without human influence, or is there kind of a time scale for that?
That is a really complicated question. So it depends on the size of the river, the geology, so how soft the sediment is and how easy it is to move. Streams can move very rapidly with a huge, you get a huge 500-year storm event. There might be rapid changes, but then it might not change much over, a long period of time where there isn't a major flood. So it's highly variable, and it depends on the size of the river and kind of the context of the landscape.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so if anyone does have any other questions, we can hang out for a little bit. Do you know, have the water levels been pretty high here locally lately, or?
Yeah, we got a lot of rain in, northern and central Michigan. I don't know how large of an area it was covered. Obviously, there's, it's been in the news with what's going down in the Midland area, right? But yeah, we've had high water up here as well. I know the Agre area, I saw some video that there was some pretty significant flooding down in that area too. So yeah, it's been a high water week for sure.
Okay, great. Well, if no one has any other questions, we'll probably leave it up for just a little bit longer. Okay, so we have one. Why don't Michigan rivers normally get whitewater?
So I'll speak to northern Michigan where we are. So I'm in Gaylord, but kind of our region in the northern Lower Peninsula. It has to do with really the geologic history. So we have a lot of sand up here, right? So sand is a fine material that really allows for good drainage of water. So we tend to have really stable sand bed streams here that are fed primarily by groundwater. And the slope of those streams isn't overly rapid. So we don't have those bedrock formations that form large drops or rapids. It's more of a gradually meandering sand, or there's some gravel, but we don't have big discontinuities in the stream bottom that create those really fast areas of flow like a rocky bedrocky area would have out west.
Interesting. So is part of that then to the topography of the area, because we don't have really big hills, we don't have mountains out here too?
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. It's just the slope of the general landscape is more gradual. The rivers that flow through it tend to follow that and be more gradual as well.
Okay, great. All right, well, if there are no more questions, we'll probably head off. But if you do have any more questions or anything, you can follow up with Chris or with Josh. Their emails are in the chat.